With our panel for the afternoon. This panel is on e-security, and moderating it is Bukola Ogunleye, Principal Sales Consultant of Oracle. You might have heard her in the workshop before this, but let me ask Bukola to please come up on stage and take over for this panel. Let me also ask the two panelists to come on stage. I can see Ilya Igrimov here, Product Director for Security at Sura, is going to come up on the stage. Please welcome Ilya, and let me also ask Kenny Tijani to please come up on stage. I just saw her, I think a few minutes back, maybe she's outside.
Individuals, as organizations, and as a government. So I think let's just come in before we start.
Round of applause again, please, for our three panelists. We have a full panel, Bukola, Ilya, and Kenny.
So I think we can start by introducing ourselves. My name is Bukola Ogunleye. I'm Principal Consultant with Oracle. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Ilya Igrimov. I'm Product Director from Zura, and I'm leading our security product line.
Hi, I'm Kenny Tijani. I'm Public Sector Solutions Lead for Microsoft.
Okay, so let's get started. Let me ask you this simple question. Do you think cybersecurity is something everyone should be concerned about?
Yes, of course. That's, I think, it's extremely important topic. This is extremely important topic for the whole population, starting from normal people, starting from students, starting from business people, everyone essentially, all the way to the companies that are enabling communication, and all the way to the regulator, all the way to the ministers. So we have been talking a lot today with different representatives from the ministries from all over Africa. We raised a number of topics that they were not aware of, and I think the topic is becoming very, very important, especially in the continent like Africa, which has the technology in possession, which is can be much more developed than, for example, Europe or Americas, and use that technology. But in the end, if we will talk about the security, what the business can do to the people, of course that's important, and that's what we can help the business with. But at the same time, security is the aspect that every individual has to take care of. Because you know what, we can protect you on a network level, but I cannot prevent you from installing certain applications that will hijack your phone, for example. And of course, some of the companies are targeting the youth, are targeting normal people by attracting them and install these applications and this kind of stuff. So therefore, yes, it is a public concern, but it is important that we not only look at the security as a technical measure, but we also educate people. That we educate people that nothing is for free in this world. And when they see something that is perceived for free in the electronic world, they are conscious and they are aware that they might be exposed to certain security risks.
Thank you very much. Very explicit. So, knowing now that everybody should be aware and should take digital security seriously, what would you say are the common myths regarding security? What are the kind of fear that people exhibit? It may be true, it may not be true.
Okay, I'm saying that one of the most common myths, especially around here that I face with our customers, is that if you are holding your data or holding your information locally, then it's safer than if you have it hosted externally. So there's this perception that ownership or full control is safer than sort of having it with the cloud or at a third party, which isn't usually the case. So if you look at the recent hacks that have been sort of publicized, if you look at the recent one with where they put out estimates of politicians and the Panama one, that was not hosted in the cloud. That was hosted by the company themselves, and there was a breach, and people took out terabytes of information locally. So for me, that's the biggest misconception. The other one I would say is just assuming that cybersecurity is actually a technology problem. I don't think it's a technology problem at all. I think it's driven by incentives, and just like any other problem, whether it's Lassa fever or Ebola or any other sort of epidemic or pandemic, the way to fight it is really to educate people. It's to help people be aware. It's to make sure that you put in place defense mechanisms such that there's a threat, you can react quickly and you can recover quickly. It's to share information. Organizations should actually have one where they share information around threats that it has faced. What we find today is that if a company or an organization faces a threat, they want to hide it. They don't want anyone to know, this happened, so they don't lose credibility. But what that does though is that it makes the hacker stronger, it makes the enemy stronger because they're not sharing and nobody really knows what to look out for. I'll say also is a third misconception also, and this is particularly by governments, is that offense is the best defense. So they want to have as much ammunition. In some cases, the government actually is the one who's trying to get that data on their people and other governments and organizations, but they feel that puts them in a position of strength. However, you can have the smallest vulnerability in your network. It could be something like not ensuring people change their passwords frequently enough. And so as much as you're out there, creating a good offense, you're also kind of leaving your back door open for your data to be compromised.
Thank you very much. You've even thrown more light than I expected. So if you're not building on what you just said, you can say, Nigeria really hasn't had so much attacks in that sense. So what kinds of strategies or structures would you suggest organizations put? I mean, we don't want to go like being defensive now, but making our environment flexible to use and also ensuring that we're secure. So even if it happens, we don't get caught up.
I'd say, first of all, as a foundational, just foundationally, you should have a policy around security. And it shouldn't just be like on paper. It should be enforced throughout the organization. Policies around passwords. Passwords are the biggest vulnerabilities that we see. People use passwords like their birthday or their last name or 0000. And they're surprised when people actually do that. And it would take any untrained hacker 5 minutes to break into your network if you have those kind of passwords. So just basic things like that. You want to have a very strong policy. You want to have technology that enforces that policy. I'll give you an example of what we do at Microsoft, right? First of all, your password needs to be pretty strong. So, uppercase, lowercase, special characters. And you can't use the same passwords. You need to change it every 3 months, and you can't use it consecutively. You need to use at least 5 other passwords before you reuse a password. So it forces you to be creative around the passwords. Also, if for any reason it's compromised, you also need to have basically like a plan of how you're going to react when there's a threat. So nowadays everyone has data all around them. You have it on your PC, you have it on your tablets, you have it on your phone, and you have it, somewhere in the cloud as well. And if any of your, if any access point is compromised, you want to be able to quickly recover. You want to be able to stop access from that compromised account or stop whoever has all the details from accessing your account as quickly as possible. And all this needs to be put together in a really solid policy document. But most importantly, people tend to not follow rules unless they're forced to. And so you want to enforce it. Like if you have to change your password, you can't log onto the network, you can't access it. So it kind of forces you to do it because most people wouldn't do it naturally.
Yeah, I can imagine. A lot of us can be lazy when it comes to password. And I'm believing, I'm also thinking in addition to what you said, this policy should include like enforcing people to actually create complicated passwords. But then created such complicated passwords, and then they have to write it down because they will have to remember. Would you like to add something to that?
I think everything that has been said is totally right. In the end, you cannot expect from the business, so from the service provider, to solve all your problems. You have to be aware of that yourself. And therefore, you should be aware of how you're managing the passwords. But not only that, people also should keep in mind that any software that they install, their equipment, any web resource that they use might have quite a risk to them, might be quite a risk to them. And therefore, no matter how complicated the password is, it all can be gathered. Therefore, like I mentioned at the very beginning, making people security aware, I think it's daily business, and it's, I think, responsibility not only of the vendors, not only of the business, but also of the governments, that especially this component that requires simplification.
Thank you very much. So now we've heard that security is actually everybody's business. The organizations should set policies and strategies to start with the most critical in terms of security, managing password, monitoring password, setting password policies. But now this is looking from the organization or government perspective. Let's just look from the individual's perspective now. How do women and children, especially that are quite vulnerable using internet today, how do we cope digital security that might result into bullying, cyberbullying, and all of that?
Well, it's difficult to comment from the
we've not
female
had that
perspective.
We've not had that, but we've heard of this happening, and really it's just a matter of time.
There was a case in India. I think we're all aware that they even have changed the regulation when members of one tribe are trying to harass the members of the other tribe, and of course, female and children are the most vulnerable to that. So we from Zura were coming originally from the messaging perspective, and yes, right now today everyone has access to the internet. A lot of people are using Facebook, a lot of people are using Twitter and the other social networks. At the same time, SMS messaging is available everywhere. And SMS has been used in India for bullying, especially one group of people were offending the others. And for that, India has taken regulation that in case of an unrest, an operator has to throttle the amount of messages that people can send. Well, in response to that, we have developed actually a solution that we position as messaging anti-spam that can automatically detect all these kind of attempts. So it's important that also business steps in and protects people, protects the environment, protects especially vulnerable part of the population. But at the same time, I think it is a responsibility of parents when they also have 2 kids, right? And I'm very concerned when my oldest son right now is using his iPad, watching YouTube, using WhatsApp and all that stuff. I'm very concerned how it is happening. So what we also see rising right now is another trend, that there are some applications that allow to enforce parental control, that allow enforcing parental control on the tablets, on the other devices, on mobile phones. And actually being just a parent, just an individual, I would be ready to pay for that. Therefore, you can think also of monetizing that factor. Yes, everyone is vulnerable, but you can try to harass me, you can try to start bullying me. I'm kind of not I'm Russian, right? It's impossible to do that. But my kids are definitely exposed to that. My wife can be exposed to that. So I think, again, it is awareness, and at the same time, any kind of, that's where we can think of the innovation, right? So any innovation in that area that will improve parental control, that will improve control of the messaging, the use of the social network is extremely important. So in addition to that, it would be good to understand in automated manner what kind of social behavior should be blocked. And we have such a solution, for example, for mobile networks, but I think society needs to think further, needs to think beyond. We need to think about the AP services, and as long as the whole population will start screaming about that, then obviously Facebook and WhatsApp will have to react.
Thank you very much. So moving on now, let's go back to the government application. I'll come back to you for deal with government, deal with organizations. How would you recommend they prioritize and justify investment in cybersecurity? Because I'm assuming putting in infrastructure, structures, and strategies and policies for cybersecurity from the government's perspective. How would you recommend they justify that investment?
How would I recommend they justify the investment in cybersecurity? In terms of what impact it can have when you have a porous system or when you have porous systems. I don't even think I can quantify it in figures or facts, because I mean, if you take, for instance, Nigeria, right? If someone were to hack into NNPC, which is our biggest sort of entity, there's so much damage that can be done. You know, it could mean fear queues, it could mean people who have goods on the sea that couldn't be delivered. It could mean people actually die because we have power issues, and we don't have fuel for a generator. And some people may not actually survive if they're in hospital. There's so much that we can have in terms of impact, and I don't think we do a good job of tying, the cause to the effect. But if we did, whatever the government is spending on cybersecurity, I don't think would be sort of inflated too much. It's really important that we prioritize it. But I think what's even more important is what we're spending on and how we're spending, how you're executing, because you can commission a large, data center project, you can train 1,000 youth on cybersecurity, but that does not necessarily mean that you're safer than you were before. I think the biggest thing here is because the biggest threats come from just people that are not aware, people that don't know what the threat is. So you leave your phone without a password, and you leave it on the chair, and by the way, you got your bank. You saved your password. True story. A friend of mine actually saved his access to his bank portal as a contact on his phone. So you get the phone is not passworded. You open it, you get just search for some bank, and then you pull it out, and you're logged in. You can transfer money just like that, right? The thing is, nowadays people don't think like 2 steps forward. I'll give you another example. This one happened to me, and I'm pretty IT savvy. I preach this thing, but sometimes you still have gaps, right? I had a phone that was stolen at a party, and immediately I blocked access to my phone. I made sure that I changed my passwords, all of that. So I was quite happy to know that even though they had the phone, they couldn't use it, right? And for a while they kept sending me messages, text messages. I mean, they won't send it directly. They send you a message that say I'm from like your cloud provider, and I need you to log in to do something. And I know what that is. So it didn't work for a while. But one day I had a really long day. I think I was in Abuja. I had a really stressful day, and I just went back to I was in that day, and a message came in, and somewhere in my haze, I opened up a message, and it said something like, "Oh, we found your missing phone. Click on this to see the location." And I got really excited. So I went in, I clicked on it, I logged in with my password, and as soon as I logged in, I said, "Something is wrong here. This is not how this is supposed to work." Right? And so it took me like 1 minute to go to the correct site and log in, and then I realized they're taking the phone off my profile. But the bigger threat there, I was glad they took the phone. I already lost it anyway. I was glad it was like I was losing something new. But the bigger threat was that I had 3 other devices on that same profile. They could easily have wiped my devices. They could have changed the passwords. They could have stopped me from using any of my devices. I would need to change all my systems. They can have access to my pictures, they can have access to my personal information. And this is me and I self-technology, right? But because at that moment I wasn't thinking, I fell for it. And luckily the threat was limited. If I think about, someone who's not as aware, who's not thinking about it in that way, and of course immediately I went and changed my password, but that's because I realized something was wrong. If I didn't realize it, I would have left it, and maybe the person would go back and say, what else can I do here? So it really boils down mostly to awareness. People should be top of mind. I remember when we had a scare of Ebola epidemic, it was everywhere. There were hand sanitizers, literally only taxis there. In fact, some taxis had them, and just give it sanitizer as you're walking. But you could never forget the fact that there was a threat. And because of that, it didn't spread at all. We're able to contain it and manage it and kill it. And I think that's the same thing we need to do for cybersecurity. But everyone needs to be aware. You get a funny email, you get a funny text message. They always look friendly and they always look like something that you've been waiting for. And people that do things that they're quite smart, so they practice in a way that you're likely to click on it, you're likely to put in your details before you realize that something is wrong. So just awareness, and most importantly, I'll say if the government is going to prioritize something, it should be that. But then also in terms of how they address organizations is we need strong policies and frameworks. I have a friend who has a startup which is an online business, and you want to buy something online, you put in your name, your phone number, your address. They even had this link to if you wanted to pay online, which didn't work. It wasn't working, but it was still there. So some people will click on that link. They don't realize that this is not a secure platform. They put in their card details, and it goes into those people's backend. I saw a couple of them like that. And there's nobody regulating this space. There's nobody saying before you collect PII, personal identifiable information, that you should actually need some security bar. So anybody can go online, get a store, software, open a shop, and start collecting people's personal information. And you can do whatever you want to do. Nigeria is that is the case. Right? So I would say you want to have frameworks that don't allow these sort of things to happen, that kind of forces companies to go through a rigorous process. You should start from when you're registering a company. What kind of data are you going to be collecting? How are you securing that data? What sort of baseline certificates do you need to have in order to collect that type of data? And how do you communicate that to your customer before they even start to give you that sort of information? So I think government needs to do that. And the last thing is to create an enabling environment where people can share information safely. Create incentives for people to actually share. Because sometimes companies don't want to talk or publicize this because they think they'll get penalized for this, or you get blacklisted, or they'll get into a blacklist. And if you make it easier for the CIO to say, I was almost hacked last week, this was my vulnerability, then it really helps others to go and plug those holes. So I think government can really be like a central drive out some of these strategies to implement for you.
Thank you very much. Two things I picked from what you said that I'd like you to put more light on. First, in terms of password. So this password we talked about it extensively, but I've discovered that a lot of people really have issues in terms of remembering their password, and this is because you have so many passwords. So you have in your office, maybe you have like 4, 5, 6 applications that you have to log into. You need to remember all the passwords. You have your Windows password, your phone password, your iPad password, your bank password. Then God help you, you have like 2, 3, 4 bank accounts. You need to remember all those passwords. And at a time, you might say, let me use the same password for them. But they all don't have the same password policy. So you might log into one that says, oh, I use any, all lower cases. You log into another that says you must have one uppercase and one character. You log into another, so different kind of password policy. And a lot of people now store their password on their phones. So how do you think, as individuals, we can actually address this? What would be your recommendation if we have to log into several systems, several applications, and what kind of password trench should we use as individuals?
What should be your personal password regime? Okay, so that's not easy one because it really depends on you. So some people are great at remembering stuff, but I'm going to try and pitch this for people that are not great at remembering their passwords. But first of all, you want to you want to have strong passwords. So even if an application or a website allows you to just put 0000, don't do that. You want to have a strong, but what I mean by strong is you want uppercase, lowercase, special characters at least. What some people do is have a letter that they replace with a number every time, right? It helps you remember. So every time you see an A, you replace it with a Z, or you replace it with the number 44. Something that you're comfortable with, right? You want to use words. I find that word-based passwords are kind of more natural. So it could be some words that have some meaning to you, but not very common words. Something that has meaning to you, but you also want to change it around. So some people want to use their children's names. Fine, but if your children's name is Lola, so maybe O, you can replace O with 365. So L 365, LA. Have something that you remember, and then think of what a special character can be. And you can write that down somewhere. So you can write O is equal to 365 if you want to remember. Another thing you can do is basically have an app. So it's a lot of if you have a smartphone, there are apps that actually allow you to save your password securely, such that you don't need to remember the password to the app itself. As opposed to saving it as a contact on your phone, which is quite, if you think about it, your phone contacts probably sync to your email, probably sync to other devices as well. So you don't want to do that. You want to have an app that's secure and you can save your passwords in your password size. But I think having a couple of passwords that you use, so I probably have like 5 or 6. And there's some I use for personal stuff, some I use for work stuff, bank stuff. I try to remember that loosely. So if I open an application and I have 5 or 6 passwords, if I can't remember, I just run through all of them. And then if none of them work, then I go to reset password. Because I didn't remember. There will always be times like that. But I'll say number one, have some sort of framework personally. Make sure it includes numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and special characters. If you have a password that is just lowercase, just numbers, it is very, very high risk. You want to guard it. You want it to be something that means enough that you remember, but not that it means enough that other people will remember as well. So not your birthday, not your middle name, not your mother's maiden name, none of that. Stuff that means something to you. And lastly, use an app if you can. Never, ever save your password as contact on your phone. Because that's the first thing somebody who gets hold of your phone is going to check. Because that's what most people do.
Wow, thank you so much. I hope we've learned something from what you just said. The second thing I wanted to pick out from when you were talking was about e-business. E-business is growing in Nigeria. There's a lot of online shops and all of that. Some will have to pay online and all. But I'm not aware of any policies from the government in terms of monitoring and managing who. So I shop with an online shop. How do I know they're not selling my data to somebody? So what would you recommend in terms of how should government handle this online marketing, the gathering of data, and possibly using the data for third-party sales?
Well, generally that requires some regulation. I think if we look at the European countries, when we look at the Americas, then governments, they do introduce regulation for that. And generally that results into a certain certificate that people should be aware of. So as long as this certificate is in place and it is present on the website, then it's more or less secure. Additionally, we should be thinking about the secure payments, right? So currently, majority of the credit cards, they enable centralized system. And obviously, people should be aware that they would rather use the payment system which is provided by the global provider rather than the one which is provided by a small local shop that might be vulnerable. But at the same time, from the governmental perspective, once again, that's regulation that has to step in terms of protection. And in the end, that's education of the people, like I have mentioned. What is important, maybe to add to the previous question that we had, because that also has a link here. Yeah, so any solution that we are talking about, anything what we are discussing, it has actually two goals, right? One goal, generating additional revenue, and the other one, saving revenue. When we think about the security, and it links also to the enforcement of, for example, electronic payments, etc., and businesses trying to save money or save their investments, right, into the secure payments. When the government is trying to maybe save effort in organizing all that, then essentially we can quantify the risks that you're exposed to. Because any failed transaction will result into a refund, maybe. And that will be a damage to the credit card company. And if the credit card company knows that the business could have prevented that, it will be damage to the business. So when you take a countrywide approach, regulation approach, then definitely that indicates overall attractiveness of the country for the external investment. Because today, a lot of services went online, right? And a lot of people are trying to invest into the popular services. If the country is not secure, so they cannot enforce the security for the mobile payment, then it becomes less attractive for the investment from the outside. Therefore, we should always look one step ahead, right? And once again, the solution, whether it is a regulatory solution or it is a commercial solution, it will just serve two major goals: generating additional revenue or saving revenue. Therefore, the interest of the regulation, the interest of the government would be to raise attractiveness of the country for the external investment. And obviously, cybersecurity raises that interest. The interest for the business would be saving the revenue. Because in the end, today, we are working, for example, with American Express, who in some countries would like to have a service where you make a payment, right? They want to validate that you're physically in that country. So they link your credit card to your phone number, they do a location check, and if I'm really here, then they authorize the payment. Because in case this payment will happen with the unauthorized source, they essentially have to refund money back to me. Therefore, there will be revenue damage to them. Therefore, coming back to the previous question, it's in the interest of both business and the regulation to generate additional revenue or to save revenue.
Thank you very much. So it still boils down to the fact that the government needs to have standard regulations, standard policies, and standard structures to curb digital cybersecurity. Now, so we've heard so much in terms of cyber attacks and all of that, and lots of people are paranoid about carrying out business online, taking online marketing, for instance, online marketing. I know quite a lot of people, although online marketing is now more popular, but I know a number of people that are still so scared to go online to a bank and transfer money, because of this fear and all of that. So what would you advise individuals and organizations that are scared of carrying out businesses online? How would you advise them?
I think firstly, in this age, if everything you do is offline, then you're really limiting the potential of your business. And if as an individual, everything you do is offline, you're really limiting your own potential, right? Because that means basically if you wanted to send a letter to Lagos, you would have to get on a bus or you would have to go to the post office. So, it's just think about loss of productivity and all of that. It's really not worth it. So you need to do some stuff online. I guess the question is, how do you do it safely? And the most important thing for anyone is that you understand what the risks are, right? There are risks everywhere. Coming here today, there are risks all over the place, right? Getting into the car, driving, and if you look at the stats road accidents. Yes, there's risk even going, from the hotel room here for some people fall down the stairs, but it doesn't mean that it's going to happen to you. And if you understand what the risks are, then you can guard against them. So the first one is, instead of being scared and saying, no, I'm not going to do that, is spend some time trying to understand what the risks are. The other thing is, that I would say is, understand what looks like a threat, right? I think if you work in this space for a very short time, actually, you start to see what threats look like, right? They usually come as an email, as a text message, unsolicited stuff like, oh, my bank asked me to come and apply for something I didn't really show any interest in. It's usually something like that. And so whenever you get something that looks questionable, go with your gut. If you're not sure, pick up the phone and call somebody. Don't be shy to say, I don't think this looks right. Protect yourself. Be vigilant and protect yourself. I also say, in terms of businesses, you really want to limit the points of failure. You want to limit how many, entry points you have to be attacked, right? And Ilya made a point earlier, which is that one place where we don't really look at, and I'm really talking about past, but one thing we don't really look at is what applications are running in your environment. Do people just, do you give your employees a laptop and can they just take that and install whatever they like on it? And how do you regulate that? How do you manage what sort of, what is running in your own environment? Because some of them are good, but some of them can be trusted, right? You download something that's supposed to be a video game, and right in the back end, it has some code that's crawling through your database and looking for information. But you don't know that. So from an IT perspective, you really want to manage what you allow in, and you want to have control remotely to say that, even though Kemi is at home installing this thing, I don't like the way it looks, so I'll block it, or so I'll wipe it. You want to have control, and you don't want to leave control in the hands of the users, because the users are like kids. They're just going around doing stuff, and you need to be there to say, no, you can't do that, or ring fence something. So you really want to be able to do that as a business. But most importantly, and I can't make this point enough, it's just awareness and education. Because if you're going to tell somebody not to install an app, you need to tell them why. You need to tell them what the risks are, because nobody's really trying to bring down the organization. But if they don't understand why, then they take those kind of risks. And I'll tell you another story. One of our accounts in the Middle East recently had a big oil and gas organization. Somebody, not even an IT person, but somebody found a gold-plated flash drive in the parking lot. Gold, looking great, picked it up, I don't have one. Takes the flash drive, and then one day decides to use it, plugs it into the network computer, and everything went down. And obviously it started to bother everyone, right? All their IT providers to come and figure out what happened, but that was what happened. And that's not even a threat you can anticipate. That somebody's going to drop a flash drive in the parking lot that's just waiting for a good Samaritan to pick it up and go and put it into the network. But that happens. And if you don't tell people it can happen, they won't even know. They just go around doing things and you don't know what the impact is. So you really want to educate. If it sounds crazy or whatever, still tell them this thing can happen. Don't take any risks. Don't plug in anything that you're not sure of. If you find things hanging around your organization that could be a threat, take it to IT or go report it to security or something like that. But you want to have a process around it for sure.
Thank you so much, Kevin. You want to answer that?
It's okay.
Okay, so we come to the understanding and clarification that awareness is very key. Whether as an organization, as a government, or as individuals, of cybersecurity to manage digital security, we always need to be aware. Now, I would now want to know, how do you think, as governments, or as companies, or as schools, how can institutions build human resource capacity, educate people? Because we keep saying people need to be educated, they need to be aware. How can we handle this awareness? How can we educate people on how to help this digital security?
Well, I think that's more or less an obvious approach that I would think here. That's definitely open publications, right? But you should also think about the channels that people use to reach security. So you just recently mentioned, Kenny, that you've been addressed with a text message, right? So we're working a lot in that space, and if the network that you are on had our solution, you would never receive it. But at the same time, I'm serious, we see a lot of things happening like right now worldwide. But at the same time, text message has indeed total reach today. And today, schools, they have mobile numbers of all the parents. No one stops, actually, authorities to send around some informational messages just to remind people that please be aware, like, don't disclose your passwords. Because people just need to know that. And you can try to guide them to the internet resources. So you know what, if the fraudsters are using these kind of channels, why we as a business, why we as a regulator cannot use that too? And information messages, that's one of the ways to do it. Obviously, when dealing with the kids, you can bring that up in a nice manner, just introducing that in schools. Like today, they're doing that with traffic rules, but actually, I live today in Holland, and at school they use a lot of electronic devices. So they can actually educate people, educate kids how to use that, what to do and what not to do. And once again, our kids are much more developed than we are. They all have mobile phones. So yes, make sure that this part of the population is slightly more protected on the mobile operator level. Yes, that's an investment, but it will save you money later on. Because you know what, if my kid is attacked through his mobile phone, and yes, I'm aware that it could have been stopped, then mobile operator might essentially face legal charges initiated by me. And I'm pretty sure I will win the case. And that would be a huge financial damage. So essentially, that will be the justification for the mobile operator to install the solution, right? But coming back to the original question, I think no one stops us to use the same information channels, the ones that fraudsters are using. Short messages, social networks, emails, etc., etc., etc. And I think people will get more education on that. And definitely, I think we should also think of the financial organizations, because one of the previous questions was how to make sure that people are starting to use electronic banking. Yeah, of course, there are ways to do that, but as long as also financial organizations are stimulating people to use electronic money, by, for example, making it cheaper than using physical money. At the same time, they can also educate people. They can get a mandate from the government to do that. It can be just regulated. So I think all channels are good. It is important that some of the non-profit organizations are participating in that area, because in the end, it's a matter of public safety.
Thank you very much. What are the thoughts on how to create awareness for this?
Okay. I would say for businesses, and if the government is going to help drive something, it would really be ideal if they do it in partnership with some people that have more experience in this space. So, what are the large OEMs that really have invested in studying cybersecurity, and how can you sort of create a forum where you can share that information with people in government, but we also with the general public, whether it's through events like this, whether it's through doing like outreach programs to universities, schools, or even just training, regulators and civil servants to understand what it takes to really manage information security or cyber security. Another approach I would say is something we do again at Microsoft is in order to catch a thief, sometimes you need to think like me. And so invest in that. So at our court, we have something called the red team and the blue team. And for any solution that is sort of coming out. You have the red team who's there to break that into that solution, and you have the blue team there to fix it, right? These people are incentivized on how successful they are hacking in, finding vulnerabilities, and the others are incentivized on how quickly they're able to patch it and make it difficult for others. And I think that's something, both organizations and the government can invest in terms of having specialized teams, training them, send them to the best schools, give them exposure to the best information on the topic, and just allow them to look for the vulnerabilities in your system, so that before the external factors do, and incentivize them properly. So I'll say, that's another approach. But in terms of just driving mass awareness, because there's one thing from the organization's perspective, but for nowadays, everyone has a smartphone, and there are like millions of apps. You go to the app store, there are apps for everything. And the people who are developing these apps, if they're not thinking about security the right way, you put everybody at risk, because you download their apps on your phone, and there's all kinds of things coming out of that. So you really want to educate developers, anyone who's building something for the general public, to really understand how they go about security, and then you want to vet them as well. And this will be, I'll say, through universities, wherever people are learning how to build applications. Because we're only going to see more and more applications in the future, so we might as well start to get it right now. And for the general public, for kids, for people who are not even educated at the tertiary level, it's just, again, awareness, radio, TV, put it everywhere, let it kind of be the way you think about security. The same way you need to lock your door at night, you need to have a secure password, because it could be more of a threat to your life than actually your door being left open. And it's just people understanding that there's a shift between security from physical realm to actually the communication and information security, and how much of a threat that will be. So that really would be my approach.
Thank you very much, Kenny. I think what we're taking from here now is we need to take digital security as important as physical security. So there's so much. I remember when the last year came out, there was so much information there. So everybody was aware. Now, why can't we take such approach in terms of digital security? Because we might think Nigeria is not under attack in terms of digitals and online and everything. But I believe there are organizations, there are individuals that have been attacked, but we're just not aware. Because people are really not talking. So we can start as government, the government can start out by ensuring that we take digital security as serious as the physical security. Thank you very much, Kenny. Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience?
Yes, we have one right here.
We've discussed a little question security, but obviously there are a number of operators here in the audience. So I was maybe if you could elaborate on what signal security risks there are in terms of the operators.
Well, I think we've been talking right now in about the cybercrime, right? And we've been talking, for example, about the banking sector. So it is actually the fact that financial institutions are trying to protect any financial transactions with currently known mechanisms. One of these mechanisms, for example, is the two-factor authentication. I think some people are aware of that, so whenever you want to transfer money from your bank account, you will receive an SMS with a code, and you will execute the money transfer. But what I can tell you right now, because well, we are in this business, you mentioned that passwords, it's an individual thing. So technically speaking, any laptop, any computer is vulnerable. So it is possible to break into the computer system and essentially log in on your behalf into the electronic banking. So far, people were using this two-factor authentication to improve the secure transfer. However, what my colleague has just mentioned, due to the recent vulnerabilities discovered of the mobile network, it is possible to intercept this SMS where you receive this two-factor authentication key. And in all honesty, it's not that difficult to do. So as long as a fraudster would like to target a specific individual and compromise the financial transfer from his or her bank account, it is all doable. And even my team can demonstrate that. And I can take it further. These security vulnerabilities of the mobile network can go far beyond that. That being there in Europe, it's possible to intercept any phone call that you have. It is just the question that a number of people are not aware of that. But if you look at the publications on the internet, if you look at the recent developments, it is a problem today. Operators simply didn't pay enough attention on the security of the border control of their mobile network. And that's exposing actually every one of us. Technically speaking, no one wants to attack me probably, because what I'm discussing just delivery timelines on the phone and my next visit to another country, right? But as long as we are talking about the minister, or we're talking about an individual who is controlling a huge financial organization, then obviously there is a financial reason to do it. And I can give you a handful of links on the internet where you can buy this service, and they're using exactly that vulnerability. So it is important that we all realize that mobile operators have to step in. What I can tell you, actually, knowing that again from my team, that African mobile operators are slightly more developed than even Europeans. So you are slightly more secure than, for example, my phone, but still not completely. So in the end, if the operator doesn't have a solution to do the border control of their network, then essentially we're all vulnerable. We should keep that in mind. Luckily, such an activity, it's not cheap, and therefore a specific person has to be really personally addressed, and there is a financial reason to do that, generally. But technically, there are issues that are exposing all of us.
Okay, good. We have one more question. We have lots of questions. Let's take this one and then all these back to back.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to pick it up from the first word you said, or the first phrase that as long as we are all connected, we are not secure. Technically, anything you do in the cyberspace, there is equally somebody with the requisite knowledge that can undo what you have done. So I think we need to have that on the background. Our lady panelist said just now that people need to be aware, and we need to encourage them to use systems, solutions. But the thing is, with the digital space, trust has to be earned, and it's a responsibility on whoever is providing any type of service to ensure that the customer earns their trust. That could even be a niche. In ECOWAS, we have been struggling for the past 2-3 years to harmonize the e-commerce cybersecurity legislation, and I happen to be a part of that. They are very good documents, but do they actually meet the purpose? Are they just documents lying down? So the traditional sense of government is enabling employment normally has to do with putting the laws and the policies in place. So the industry has to help the government to make sure these documents are relevant. There are 3 different types of regulation. The one that government will force, there is co-regulation between industry players, and there is self-regulation. So I think if people need to have the confidence to participate in a digital space, then these companies have to be really responsible and make sure I feel protected, then I'll be confident in participating in the digital space.
Great. The question on trust, and your question would be?
Yes, I thank you for a good presentation. But I heard you talking about the security and all that stuff, which is very important. But there's something that you talked about, but you didn't go deeper in terms of the Facebook. It's very important. We use it, but on the other side, it's something which is being misused. You know some of the issues that are being posted there. For example, pornography and others that we can talk about. Is there any solution? At least to minimize that, because we say, we can't deal with it. We can't, say, okay, we close it like any other countries, but we still need it, but to control it, at least for the sake of the children and others. Can't we do something? Thank you.
Okay, let's take one more question from you.
Thank you for the nice presentations and discussion. I have two questions actually, given that the human factor in security, as we have seen even in a statewide or nationwide, there are three classic examples came up. One is to do with WikiLeaks, that it leaked out in the name of whistleblower. Secondly, the guy Snowden from US, who is now in Russia. He also stole it in US information and gave it to everybody else. Recently, the Panama issue came up as well. And then recent case of financial crime came up actually in Bangladesh. About $100 million has been taken out from the Federal Reserve Bank of US, sent to Sri Lanka and Philippines, countries trying to struggle to get the money back. It's a state kind of city. So how does this human factor can be minimized in a situation like this? And lastly, you saw that FBI with the third party taken out the Apple iPhone and take out the information from Apple iPhone, when Apple and everybody else refused to do that. So if I have access to that company in Israel, I can easily take out a silly new phone and get all the information. So in this kind of environment, how do we survive? We are not individual, we don't have much knowledge, but looks like there's a big players all over are trying to do basically harm everybody else.
Just about 10 minutes left, so maybe in 3 minutes each, you can address some or maybe all of those questions. Take the first one.
Sure. Okay, so the gentleman who asked about Facebook, and I'll even expand that to say social. How you protect yourself from the information that's there. The truth is, it still boils down to the individual. I know Facebook tries to do a lot in terms of allowing you to report abuse of their platform, but if nobody reports it, they may not catch it. But saying that, though, as an individual, you can actually set your privacy restrictions on Facebook. You can determine, for instance, nothing comes on your feed unless you're following it or if you're a friend with that person. And so if you're not comfortable with the feeds you're getting, you may want to unfollow, or you may want to just take that person as your friend. Or definitely report abuse. Also, in terms of just people accessing your information, because I think the biggest threat of Facebook for me is, it knows my birthday, it knows who all my friends are, it knows, where I've been. It knows, for a while, my phone used to check into places on Facebook without me initiating it till I blocked it. But that means that people could actually map my movement based on my Facebook account, right? And to me, that's actually even a bigger threat. So what you want to do is, some things are enabled by default. You want to actually spend some time reading that privacy document, that privacy policy, and see if you're comfortable with it or not. You want to go through their privacy settings and make sure that whatever it is you're not comfortable with is set to negative, so that people cannot access your account or get in touch with you if you don't want them to. So just take some time, do the work. It's a painful process, but it will save you a lot of stress later on. But otherwise, if it's too intrusive and then you may need to give it up. But that doesn't mean that you're giving up all the good things. So I would say just learn about how to manage it. The same way you learn about managing anything else, learn how to manage your social media and just set the right policies for yourself.
Bukola, I think you can answer some questions.
It still boils down to the individual. So a lot of times we don't take the time to even read on how to handle this, how to do these things. A lot of people just create Facebook accounts and they're just there adding friends and all. So first and foremost, we need to be aware that there is a document in Facebook that you need to read so you know how to handle the policies. There's several policies that you can check. You know, you can either enable or disable. So a lot of things are enabled by default. So we need to take time to read. You know, someone once told me that a lot of us, you know, there's, it's actually Microsoft, when you install most applications, especially Microsoft, you have the read me first. The read me first is you read it so you can understand how the application works. But a lot of us don't read it. So if we really take time to study on this, we will be able to educate ourselves on how to curb the menaces around social media. Okay, that's not the question you asked, is how you say.
Maybe I can try to elaborate.
Okay.
Well, I think where the question is coming from, if we look at the service providers, mobile operators, right, we are all in telecom space here, they fall under the regulation. So essentially, in the majority of the countries, law enforcement can be applied to the communication that you do over your phone. So to the voice calls, to the messages that are being sent, there are laws that enable governments to apply law enforcement and actually filter out the content or essentially track a certain individual if he's been spotted in terroristic activity or something like that. The social networks and the messengers are not legally service providers. They're just applications on your phone. And it's actually a problem worldwide that the traffic is being encrypted and no control can be enforced on these applications. And here, actually, I think the community, which is governments and which is businesses, have to work together. I can give you an example. One of the popular messages out there is Telegram. And it's being used a lot by the ISIS for to coordinate their activities. And a number of governments have been trying to block Telegram from use in their countries. But in response, obviously, these are people also behind. They're trying actively to hunt down the accounts and shut down that. Thank you. And shut down them. And they have done it under pressure by several governments. I think we have right quorum here to start creating the awareness and put pressure on the social networks. I can give you actually a little bit of insight of what's happening in the US. Originally, Google was trying to become an ultimate service provider because you have the Google phone, you can have a phone number, you can have messaging with them, you can have essentially very shortly full RCS communication with them. So they were suggesting FCC to change the law in such a way that they will become an ultimate worldwide service provider. So FCC has done it, and they face the fact that they will have to comply with the security enforcement, with the Law Enforcement Act, like implementation of the lawful intercept. And right now they are trying to oppose it in Congress. So that was their mistake, and probably they will revert it back because they don't want to do that anymore. But at the same time, I think if you look at the Facebook, they're also individuals, and I think they can share the worries of the region. They can understand that what you are trying to do. And it's only coordinated activity within the country that can be applied. Technology is there. So as long as the channel becomes available to apply the law enforcement, to apply anti-spam technologies, to apply filtering technologies that are required to enforce security in the country, it can be done. But the companies who are behind the social networks, who are behind the messages, they have to collaborate.
And that's why I cannot do it for you. We are just business. We do business to business, we sell the solutions, and yes, we can think of that. But you being representatives of the government, you have to raise the questions. And we see it happening in some of the countries. As long as the regulation is there, yes, of course, people will not be that happy that you will threaten blocking Facebook, right? But at the same time, I think it's all negotiable, and it's a question of what type of access these companies can provide to you. And I know that some of the social media is quite open for interaction with the analytics and any kind of law enforcement solutions. The others are less. But in the end, we are talking really about governmental activity here.
We are almost out of time now. Nicola, would you like to sum up with maybe 3 key takeaways from this panel discussion?
Yes.
3 things people must keep in mind.
Okay, so key things that we must take away from here, first and foremost, security is everybody's business. So whether it's physical security or digital security. And the question that was asked there around curbing internal security, because security really starts from the inside. If somebody doesn't get access to your password, they won't be able to attack your system inside. So first and foremost, we need to be aware of password policies, create strong password policies as organizations, create not so easy passwords as individuals, but that's on the one side. On the other hand is, as individuals, as organizations, we need to understand that cybersecurity is real. It's really not a myth. And it's not just about having your data outside. Kemi talked about the fact that there's a fear of, I don't want to take my data out because it might be attacked. Your data can be attacked even when it's inside. So it's not about where the data sits. It's about the policies that you set around your system, around your data, around your applications as organizations. Then as a government, I think it is very important for the government to set standards and structures in place to curb the menace of cybersecurity. So when we look at transacting online, e-business and all of that, who is monitoring that? I'm not aware if there are any policies, government policies guiding this, because everybody is really going online to transact their business. And it's not just about paying online, it's even about my data. So I want to make a purchase, I put in my name, my phone number, my address and everything. Somebody is taking that data. What is the assurance that I have that they won't sell that data? So I think government also needs to play a strong part in curbing cybersecurity.
Terrific. A round of applause, please, for an absolutely insightful, very entertaining panel for more than an hour. We now move on to the next session, which is we're going to switch back to panel tracks. There's a workshop by KPMG in the next room that is on customer service in the digital age. That's in the room just behind on the left. So please go there for that workshop if that's what you want. But we move on to our next session here on community broadband. Our next session is on community broadband, and let me ask the 3 speakers to come up on the stage. Chidi Ajuze from the CTO of BCN, will you please come up on stage? I believe Ibrahim has to leave for another trip, so I want to request Chidi Ajuze to come up on the stage, CTO of BCN. Let me also ask Brian Jenkins, VP of Intelsat, to come up on stage. Brian Jenkins, please come up on stage. And also, last but not least, we have Oyetunde, GM Regulatory Affairs at MTN Nigeria, to come up on stage. So let me invite all the 3 panelists to come up. We are still missing Mr. Oyetunde from MTN Nigeria. I'll ask one of my colleagues to go ahead and bring him in, but let's get started with this panel. This panel is about community broadband. What can... Okay, great. So we have a full panel now, and the topic of the panel is community broadband. So let me start off with a few questions for the panel, but once again, this is interactive, so all of you in the audience are most welcome to jump in with your questions as well. So we did talk about broadband in the morning and yesterday, but that is more from a service provider's perspective. We could take a look now in this session more from a community bottom-up grassroots kind of a perspective. So the first question to the panel over here is, what are some effective ways of getting alignment between all the very diverse members in a community? How do you get the people to work together and build a shared vision of community broadband, shared targets, and so on? Brian, do you want to jump in with the first one?
Well, I'm just going to correct him. Hans Gelman is standing in for Brian Jenkins. Not a problem, but yeah, obviously community broadband, broadband for a company like Intelsat is of great focus. Not just from a growth perspective, but also from a social responsibility perspective. We feel that over our platforms, any type of broadband application can be used. The broadband sphere has changed a lot over the years. There's a lot of substantial amount of new technologies that's been added, which in a sense is all complementing each other. The big drive for us all is really to bring data to the masses. That's the model and the mindset that Intelsat has taken on, is really not just focusing on the nodes and also the communities and the large nodes, but also from a rural perspective, where there is the masses in need of data.
From a mobile operator's perspective, I think the key issue for us is making sure that there is a line of continuity between what government wants to provide and what the customers require. And we believe that from a mobile operator's perspective, we provide that bridge. For us, I think the critical factor is making sure that the needs of the rural areas are in a manner that we're able to provide them with an affordable service. We at MTN have whereby we provide low-cost telephony coverage for areas that are considered by government as unserved and underserved. Obviously, also, certain areas are not profitable, so we're looking forward to, say, for example, the assistance of the USPF and, the USPF in providing requisite subsidies, to reach such places. We also note that the ministry, the government also has a rural broadband initiative to cover such areas, and we're looking to see how we can also partner with government in making sure that they're able to meet their requirements and needs. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I'll speak from from the satellite and mobile operators perspective. I'll speak more from the fixed operators perspective. Actually, backbone connectivity network is a fixed fiber network operator. I think one of the biggest challenges, especially on the community side of deploying broadband for us, is some of the government policies, especially on the regulatory side, unlocking the potentials that most of the fixed operators have. I mean, there's a generation of Nigerians, maybe most of us here, who don't even know what fixed services are. Everybody leapfrog to the mobile. And most times you have people talk about the future of Africa is mobile. But there is a core end of this that hasn't been discussed much of, which is the backhaul side of it. And for the communities, in terms of wiring the communities themselves as well. Now, the biggest issue we have is, of course, the demand drivers. Now, most people on the communities, if I engage community residents individually to provide broadband, we find out that the cost that you need to provide those services are extremely high. So what we've been trying to seek is to seek a way of aggregating demand. We get into the gated communities, aggregate some of the demands, and begin to get people to take services from you. But the biggest issues, of course, have also been in terms of infrastructure, and that's also something that hasn't been spoken much of, because the biggest side of this is that there are, like they say all the time, there are 11 terabytes of internet coming on the coast of Nigeria. The middle mile, between, for instance, between the intercity links, they exist, but where you have the lock today is on the assets layer, the retail space, taking broadband to the communities themselves.
And that's part of the engagement we are pushing in this year, to get both the regulator, the communities themselves, and also the inter-operator engagement itself, to also help us unlock those chains, that are holding down broadband adoption.
My next question is on performance of community broadband. Community broadband means different things to different people. So how do you know you have a good community broadband strategy? The speed of connectivity for these communities, the cost maybe of access to these communities, how do you measure a good community broadband initiative? Do you want to start from that side?
Yes. For me, on the fiber space, essentially we measure on the basis of homes connected, homes passed. I mean, that's the very first measure. But I think the biggest measure for me actually is the issue of affordability. Within Abuja, for instance, where we do have over 500 kilometers of fiber link within the city, we still find that adoption is still poor, and the reasons are what we've noticed most times is that for areas where we can aggregate the demand, where we can actually get municipality, gated communities, and then clusters of residents, and where they're able to come together and say, okay, we will share this cost, and then so that the retail cost to end users is a lot less. Find that affordability question is actually solved a lot more. But in terms of homes passed and homes connected, that's the essential measure on the fiber space. In terms of measuring how adoption itself is going on.
From my perspective, I think I would agree with the previous speaker in terms of affordability being the major issue in terms of making sure promoting adoption of community broadband. I think the most fundamental issue in our environment is how much does it cost to deliver the service to specific communities. Whilst communities in urban areas might be able to afford the cost, communities in rural areas will find it pretty onerous. We have a major challenge of, say for example, ensuring that we're able to build in the cost of right of way. I think that if you ask any fiber optic cable provider, any backbone network provider, that is a critical factor. And as it is at this moment, it is rather high. It is too high to be able to afford to provide services which those in the rural areas can adopt. Obviously, mobile telephony assists, but in terms of providing real broadband, in terms of maybe 5 terabits per second plus type of connectivity, it is difficult at this present time. And that's why the role of government cannot be underestimated. There is a need to ensure that we're able to engage with not just the federal authorities, but also state authorities. And we definitely commend the work of the federal government over the past 5 to 6 years. They have definitely assisted in helping us move into the right space. The adoption of a unified platform for the rollout of fiber networks in Nigeria, I think it's something that is commendable, and it's something which we as a business, and I believe the whole ecosystem of service providers definitely identifies with.
Right?
Surely in agreement with other speakers as well. I think accessibility and availability of these is also key. The big driving factors here is still the cost. Where these real growth areas from a rural perspective would lie is underdeveloped areas for that matter. And it's still a business case that needs to make sense. And therefore, for companies to realize, growing their economies of scale into these areas, it would need to make financial sense as well. Now, there's various factors and drivers that that you can put towards trying to develop such infrastructure. If I can have a brief example of a low-cost rural solution that we've recently developed and also implemented into a country, the DRC, where as soon as this nodes were created, Also it created additional businesses for the local rural communities by capitalizing on this infrastructure that was suddenly there. So as soon as companies can realize, that their investments into these areas will also grow exponentially as soon as this infrastructure is down, it will definitely make it easier to get the expansion in these areas quicker.
I have two more questions for the panel, but if anyone in the audience wants to jump in with comments or feedback on their own, this is a good time to do that. My next question for the panel is, you all come from very different sectors, fiber, telecom, fixed, etc. So what are the industry associations in each of these verticals doing to work with other industry associations? For example, is FTTH working with mobile operator associations of other countries in Africa? Are the fixed line communication associations working with mobile operators? And in your case, are you working with landline operators, for example? How do you all work together as associations? Any comments on that?
Well, I think we must never forget the key driver here is really bringing that internet to the masses again. Data is the new drug in Africa, as they call it. As soon as people get access to it, the more they want of it. I think through all the sectors and through all the technologies, I'm a firm believer that it complements each other. There are certain narrow areas where fiber is not a solution, and satellite is a suitable immediate solution and a cost-effective solution again. And there's certain areas which is a bit more developed where your terrestrial infrastructure would suffice to assure that these regions can be supported and grown. I also feel that complementing each other from a technology perspective, from a security and a redundancy perspective, there's also variable factors that the various technologies can support each other. So I feel there is a really close connection between us all, not just from a technology perspective, but also between the companies that support these. As soon as that is also realized, that the development and growth in these regions can also would surely happen quicker for them.
Okay, from our perspective, I think one of the things that we have done our best to champion, particularly in the Nigerian ecosystem, is the coordination of efforts of all key stakeholders under our industry bodies. I do believe that we've had the benefit of having, say, for example, the Association of Licensed Operators of Nigeria championing engagement with government. The association covers quite a lot of both the fixed and the mobile operators here in Nigeria. And in terms of engaging with government, I do believe over the past 2 or 3 years, we've been talking to the federal government, and we've taken the issue up such that we did have a session of the National Economic Council where they actually discussed this issue of affordability and how to ensure that they would get the coordination of all the states in agreeing to the rates set by the Federal Ministry of Works for the cost of right-of-way per linear meter. It's something which is something which is continuing to be championed by the current Minister of Communication, and is something which we as operators, both in the fixed and mobile, champion, and we will continue to engage with government. So in terms of making sure that there is some synergy in the ecosystem, I do believe we have that. And we look forward to resolving this issue conclusively in the Nigerian environment.
Yes. Maybe on my side, I'd like to say that there is no single technology that will solve Africa's broadband problems. There's no single technology. Fiber will be needed, wireless will be needed, satellite will be needed in all these spaces. So, and if you also find within some of the operators, you find all technologies within their portfolio as well. So the synergy exists. Of course, what has been missing is where you have all the operators, playing in each of those fields, coming together to form the advocacy which the government needs to actually understand how critical broadband is for the economy. I mean, there's so much talk about how 10% increase in broadband grows the GDP. Some of these are also based on the fact that the base infrastructure exists. And like we all know, the base infrastructure on its own is actually to put in the fiber infrastructure which carries the high-speed transport. Every other person on the layer can take up their services eventually. But somehow the
source of accessing the internet. Because when we are in rural areas, like myself, we usually go to rural areas, I use MTN to connect to the internet, or Globe, or some other adjacent providers. Now, what I want to say is, Ronke, you are 100 naira for 10 MB, because that's what you currently charge, is still high for rural dwellers. And you have worsened that cost by this trick. There's a trick you guys play, and that is because I use that heavily. So when you buy the data and then the thing expires, you will be forced. You guys renew the thing for us automatically without our consent. In other words, you force your customer to use the service even when he doesn't want to use it. Now, and when that happens, and the person, you don't see money. When you don't see money in the person's account, you keep on the thing hanging. So when the next recharge the person makes, you take off the money. That makes a very bad impression on the account or income of the rural dweller. So I earn money, but most rural dwellers don't earn money. That's why I said that, or they earn little. That's why I said that the 100 naira, the 10 MB is still costly. So you have to look into a way of doing it. Because what we actually need from you guys, since you are the only, you are the only people that can help us access the internet for now, is make this thing cheap. Make this thing cheap so that you talked about affordability. Affordable telephony. In fact, what we need is affordable internet access from you guys, not just telephony. But a lot of people use your telephone as they like it. So that's exactly what I want to contribute there.
Question on pricing, I guess. Pricing down middle class levels. Any comments on this point?
Okay, I would say that definitely we want to believe that we are championing the cause of affordability in Nigeria. However, there are quite a lot of ecosystem constraints that drive up the cost or prevent us from providing the kind of access that is required for those in the rural areas. I take note of what you have mentioned with regard to the particular product of 10 naira per 10 MB. And I think it's something which I will take back with me. With regards to the auto renewal, it's something which we've already addressed. We have stopped the auto renewal, and one of the things we have done is such that if you want to renew, you first of all ask your permission. Do you want to renew? It's a query that has been introduced and it's addressing that particular concern that you have raised. And for those in the rural area, rest assured that we will definitely make sure that we provide affordable, not just telephony services, but also affordable broadband services. Thank you.
Questions from the audience, please?
Okay, just want to ask a question to the fixed, selling the fixed wireless provider, the Visa, and as well as the mobile service provider, talking about backbone and right. There's about rural broadband. There's always issues with all the flooding out here, just about costs, and costs. That's all I can take from it. But there's a side you forget about acceptability and then adoptability in these rural communities. My question here is, first of all these platforms always have setbacks at some point that makes the customer bite their fingers and regret never subscribing to it. But the other side, there's always par excellence for any service provider who wants to do either payback or compensation. So far from my experience for a long time, no service provider has ever done this. I have been to rural communities where they use very high data to do certain essential services, whether being, most especially like from where I work, we deal with farmers in rural communities and they run programs where they have to link up to market access and some stuff, and they do this over the internet. And right now we have mobile data collection services, which somehow we do with mobile telcos platform, somehow in some of the offices visa. But I'm just asking the three of you, have you ever thought of, first of all, how do you compensate these people when, because they have to buy trust into the service? How do you compensate them when you have got downtime period for some time, or you have had very low service? There are times where service is not optimal. That's one. Then, have you ever thought of pro bono services in rural? Pro bono service. Pro bono. I just keep mentioning it because if you don't give this to these people, they will not see the need why this is there. They will not say how you are also performing community service because you are part of the community when you go there to deliver this. So that's one question. And the last is just to MTN. You mentioned about the economic forum where you're discussing the price for right of way. I don't know if we are reinventing the wheel because last year we had the minister for ICT said we have smart state initiative where some states have signed up to an MOU where this structure has been agreed, philosophy has been agreed on dig once, pay once. But right now your conversation is like they are going back to the old discussions of okay, what's the pricing index and what's this. So some states have already signed to this. Abuja is one of them, Lagos, Bayelsa, Cross River, and the likes. So they are partners to this. So I don't know if we are going back to reinventing the wheel and saying, okay, we now want to do a negotiation basis on rights of way. Thank you.
Okay, good. So a couple of questions in there. One was on more of the harmonization of pricing plans and service compensation, and one more towards MTN specific plans in that context. You want to start off with what your key changes in this space?
Well, from Intelsat's perspective, obviously, us as a service provider, our initiative is, and we are working very closely with certain third parties to bring this bona fide products, to the end customer. We have some kiosk, which is under development now, which will be put in rural communities, whereby these communities not only will be able to capitalize on having data access or broadband access, but also will be able to have other services from this kiosk. As I also mentioned earlier, in certain countries we already have a very low-cost rural solution, which is a combined terrestrial and satellite option, whereby not only broadband but also voice services are brought to far outreached areas. So it's it's always a great battle to assure that you can develop your solutions to give the benefit to the person on the ground, which is so much needed. I mean, that is our drive, and that is the focus of all companies I think sitting up here or dealing in this sphere, is to really give the benefit to the end customer. So from our perspective, definitely there is a drive. There's always a focus. It's not, I wouldn't say it's redeveloping the wheel. It's basically adapting to what the market offers us, and what cards we have to play with. Africa as a whole from country to country, requirements are different, regulations are different, solutions are different, the topography is different. So it's really it's taken on a you know, per se, it's a tailor-made solution for each environment. There's not a one fit for all, and that is why, you know, it's a continuous you know, design and brainstorm to ensure that the benefit gets to the end customer.
I definitely align with what the previous speaker has said in terms of our aim being to deliver value to the end customer at the end of the day. From our own perspective, definitely the rural community is one which we have our eyes, we have in sight. And definitely we believe that their needs should be met by the current service provisions that we have. In terms of making it affordable to them, in terms of giving them low-cost telephony services, one of the things which we have explored, which I mentioned before, is we have this rural telephony program whereby we put low-cost base stations in specific areas. However, I must say that in terms of ensuring that we're able to deliver qualitative services, we have met a few challenges, not just with that particular project, but also challenges that affect most operators here in Nigeria, which we need to let you know about in terms of quality of service. And that's challenges such as vandalization of our base stations, power issues, you know, community unrest, community interference, all kinds of interference along among state, federal, and local authority lines with our base stations. It's one of the reasons why, for example, as an industry, we're looking to ensuring that we have the requisite legal protection for our infrastructure by way of the Critical National Infrastructure Bill. It's something which the whole industry is championing with the regulator and with the government, the Ministry of Communications. It's something which we see, you know, and it's something which government also recognizes and is necessary in our particular ecosystem. And that is one of the reasons why you, as an end user, sometimes you experience challenges when you want to use our services. It could be that maybe, for example, the fuel that is supplying the base station that you are using is stolen, or maybe even the generators in the base station that you are using are stolen. When that happens, you are unable to get the kind of service that we would like to deliver to you. So it's one of the things which we feel, and we brought to the attention of government, needs to be addressed by the whole ecosystem. Number one, making sure that our host community see our infrastructure as their property, such that they protect it from vandalization, they protect it from any form of interference. Also to see how our law enforcement agencies can bring to book those who illegally interfere with our infrastructure. You know, even fiber optic cables are such that they actually dig them, they pull them out of the ground. You know, we have road construction workers that do that. When that happens, the service which you require, we can't deliver it. So these are the costs, if I may say, to ensuring that we're able to deliver a qualitative service, a qualitative, affordable service to you. With regard to the Smart State Initiative, the Smart States Initiative, I'm not going back, what I was doing was giving the genesis of the Smart States Initiative. And it's something which the ministers, the previous minister and the present minister are driving with the operators, with our regulator, and the whole ecosystem, the whole of the ecosystem partners. So it's definitely, but as you noted, the Smart States Initiative and the new digital initiative by our present minister identifies the need to continue to engage with governments to ensure that they subscribe to the actual, what I would say, set of prescriptions which the industry would like. And one of the things which we believe is that for then the uptake by states will ensure that within their own personal ecosystem and within the communities in each of the states that subscribe to the Smart Initiative Program, that subscribe to the present minister's program, we know that the socio-economic growth in their specific states will definitely be boosted by that partnership.
Okay, I think it's also important to understand that the broadband structure itself has three major components. It's important to know that there is the physical component, which is actually you building your base stations, laying the fiber, putting the dots together. There is the network component, which essentially is in layman time lighting up those components. Then there is the services, which is the retail layer, which is actually where you have the several operators who come in to sell services on those layers. Now the challenge is that once there is a hitch in any of these layers, it affects the end user service, the end user experience. So some of the quality of service challenges you are going to have are actually not just because MTN, for instance, is overcharging you. It may just be because there are hitches in each of these other layers. You know? I said not just because, maybe overcharging. No, okay, but I think what's important also is that we need to understand that we need to unlock the potentials in each of these layers. Now, what we have, which is not just in Nigeria, but even in most other countries in Africa, is where you have vertically integrated operators, a single operator playing in all these layers. So part of the advocacy we're pushing is that we should have people who play in niche areas, and they now serve as a handoff to the next layer. For instance, if an operator who builds an open access fiber network builds that infrastructure, and every other operator comes and leases that service and provides its own layer of services. So essentially what you've done is that you've actually unlocked the potentials for the next layer of operators. Same thing for the operators at the retail layer. And that's the kind of advocacy we're also pushing, even in our own engagement.
I have another question for you which came up many times this morning also, which is the need to have a technology roadmap or a service roadmap. So would each of you care to share for the next maybe 3-5 years what kind of a technology roadmap maybe Intelsat has or what's MTN Nigeria planning to do for the next 3 to 5 years, and in your case also with PCE?
Definitely from our perspective, our roadmap, not just from a technology perspective, but also getting a bit more invested in the customer's business. For lack of a better word, getting our hands dirty with the customer's involvement, making it an end-to-end service. You know, Intelsat has always been a satellite solutions provider, and we are definitely, which will still be, but we are getting a bit more involved from a managed end-to-end service. Now we have developed several platforms, and we will continue to develop these platforms over the course of the next couple of years, whereby we will invest to limiting that barrier of entry for a lot of customers of selling solutions into Africa. By saying that, is, you know, where we would have managed platforms, and you know certain customers can buy a VNO solution over it, and resell service and manage and tailor-make his approach to his market niche the way that he wants, but just over a platform that he knows important and best of class for that matter. So that is one way. We've also got various tools, as I briefly mentioned, you know, certain kiosks that we are investing into putting into Africa, whereby you know, these kiosks with certain service a certain area, you know, short from you know, people having the capabilities of charging their phones, right down to, you know, buying certain products from this kiosk and having the access to, you know, to data applications, as well as you know, this low-cost rural solutions that is being put up, whereby we've seen that as soon as these nodes go up, you know, certain requirements are created not by us but by the community themselves. So getting a bit more invested and focused on assuring that this growth are supported from our perspective is definitely where we see ourselves over the next couple of years.
Okay, from our perspective, I think the key goal for us is ensuring that we're able to deliver value to our customers. As it is now, we have different kinds of customers within the MTN ecosystem. And one of the things which we're looking and seeking to do is to ensure that we meet the needs of each segment of customers within the MTN ecosystem. Obviously, using whatever technology is available to us. We're indeed delighted that the regulator, the NCC, are now auctioning the 2.6 gigahertz spectrum. That in itself is a definite, it opens the door for the delivery of LTE services within the Nigerian environment. And we believe that all segments of our customer base will definitely benefit from that. We do have other spectrum that we can use also, and we'll be looking to combining the spectrum that we have in ensuring that we're able to deliver LTE services, broadband services to our customers. Also, we'll be looking to make sure, as I said, making sure that both our corporate customers, our rural customers, the youth, the affluent, those who are working are able to meet, we're able to meet their respective broadband needs, as we see it. And one of the things which we'll be looking to is ensuring that that dialogue continues to be maintained and that we're in touch with their needs, their aspirations. That's what we're looking forward to.
Okay, I think for us in the next 5 years, we want to focus on the availability and affordability issue. For us, especially on the wired broadband. And we're actually grateful to NCC and USPF. They've actually been working with us aggressively. Where we see ourselves in the next 5 years is actually where, for instance, the northern part of Nigeria, which is a major unserved area as well. So we actually want to take broadband properly to these locations. Our 5-year roadmap also includes building more open access networks in these regions, such that operators like MTN, for instance, she talked about them also building an LTE network. They can actually come to us and get the pipe they require to deliver the value that some of the customers they have and they need will require. So our strategy in the next 5 years is to build much more open access networks. And the challenge again is that you have everybody building a network for his own use. But perhaps what we need to see more of is where people build networks and open it for others to use. And that's the promise we're actually driving in the next 5 years. Build open access networks, let other carriers come, use those networks and provide value to the end users.
My next question to you is about market education. How are you educating the market about the benefits of broadband? One of the speakers in the morning mentioned that the key to productivity for a country is more uptake of broadband internet by, for example, small and medium businesses. But a lot of them are not aware of how to use maybe e-commerce and other kinds of benefits of the internet. So what are some ways in which you are educating the market about the content and services available through the internet?
Well, from a social responsibility, Intelsat definitely invests a substantial amount of time in educating customers and in certain sectors in our industry on the best-in-class technology that we supply. We've got continuous training programs, we've got continuous seminars that we host on a regular basis all over Africa in certain key countries, whereby very much to the same effect as what we have here, whereby we invite key customers and we have certain workshops whereby we would invest time into speaking to the engineers, speaking to the commercial and the legal people on what applications they would need. But also then, down to the grassroots level where, the man on the street, whereby we would also invest towards educating them about the availability and the capabilities of what certain services would bring through our partners. Obviously we work through various partners that drive the growth into these regions, and we normally plan and take hands with them to assure that whatever we invest towards is well supported and educated right to the end customer.
From our perspective, I think there are 2 points I'd like to make. The first one is that I think the job of educating customers, particularly now within our Nigerian ecosystem, is one of all stakeholders, government, operators, different user communities, educating them, educating their members respectively. And I think that in terms of the second point I'd like to make also is the fact that for us as MTN, and probably I speak on behalf of other operators, the key thing for us is integrating ourselves into the lifestyle, into the work, into the lives of our respective end users, customers. And part and parcel of that is seeing exactly what they do and ensuring that what we do aligns with what they require and what they need. An example of that is, say for example, in the entertainment industry. We find ourselves at MTN as being the largest distributor of music. We've been able to bring out the Caller Tunes. The Caller Tunes service is such that whenever any star artists wants to release their new songs, they release it on the Caller Tunes platform. And we've been able to provide that kind of relevance, to not just their lives, their specific lives and their ecosystems. They've been able to cut out quite a lot of the middlemen and the loss of revenues that they were hitherto experiencing. But one of the things which we do is it's not just in the entertainment industry, but we're looking at various other segments. We have already started a marketplace, for example, for our SME community. And what we want to provide in that market is what we've provided for our SMEs in the marketplace is to provide a place for them to meet, to share their products, their services, to see what each of them do, and to see how they can maximize the sale of their goods and services, and also get benefits from other players within the marketplace. So one of the things which we seek, what we will be doing in terms of that education, is not just to go and talk to them, this is what telephony can do, but making sure that they see the relevance of what we do in their own specific lifestyles and operations.
Okay, there are 3 segments to the kind of business we do. We have a business-to-business focus. We also have a business-to-carrier focus, which of course addresses the wholesale needs of some other carriers. There is a small business-to-customer segment for us, which some of the requirements itself actually says that we should, as we connect or as we build our infrastructure, we should connect the public institutions, the educational institutions along the routes of our deployments. So as we do those deployments as well, we also engage, for instance, the institutions itself. We also have to train them. And of course, when you train the upcoming ones, you're building a whole digital city ahead of you. So, those are some of the things we do in terms of also engaging, and training people in terms of using broadband as a group as well.
I like what you mentioned about lifestyle. That lifestyle is a big part of how people consume content and connectivity. So youth are big time into digital media, and for them broadband is lifestyle. So what are some of your thoughts looking down the road on how broadband will engage youth that much more, and what are some ways in which you can work together with youth now to get them much more onto the broadband network? Your example of music was brilliant. I think one of the big challenges in the early days of the internet was there was a lot of piracy, and it was not possible for artists to make a livelihood by selling music, except for their performances or something. But now mobile operators have helped bring legitimacy back to the music publishing industry. So for young artists, it's a very good sign that you can come to broadband and use this. So what are some other examples you can cite for our audience here, which are more youth-centric? We have many academics in the audience, NGOs working with youth organizations, and so on. Any comments?
Well, on a personal note, I grew up in a very interesting period, whereby, I was involved with, when the PC started, and, as you developed from floppy disks to stiffies and CDs, etc. And now we're at a stage where, social media and available tools that people have to access this and to have access to data and broadband services is so vast and experience in the past that a lot of things are focused down this channel, and even media for that matter. If you think that, in the older days, where kids were stuck in front of the TV, now they can watch applications on their smart devices. So definitely that's a change, and that's a big driver for any data use, because that feeds the usage or the need of this this era. So definitely there is a huge focus and huge drive from a current era to have access more to that, and even more so as the examples I might be given as people that is not in a third world country or in a developed region. This access and this availability must not be excused for people maybe living in rural areas or not in certain central nodes. And that's why there's a huge drive, as we've been discussing today, to develop.
Address, say for example, the furniture, ensuring that they're able to get devices, the right kind of devices for their learning, for their learning. Ensuring that we're able to deliver computers to them, ensuring that they're able to access the internet, the right kind of for the right kind of learning information. These are things that we address, we try and address, in terms of computing.
Yeah, okay. I think somebody talked about the Smart States Initiative earlier. BCN is also part of that process, about talking about the Smart States Initiative. And some components of that Smart States Initiative actually includes building a massive fiber broadband infrastructure in each of those states. Also talks about building ICT hubs in those states as well. So these hubs will actually be, you have some ICT parks where the youth themselves will engage, and they can actually learn, programming skills, software development, and the entire. Essentially was map the filling stations within Lagos, and at each point they can actually tell you which of them could possibly have fuel there. This is because he has access to broadband, and he could actually create a group of his friends, and they will all do a mapping process too. So once there is broadband available in the hands of individuals, we could actually see that their creativity and innovation skills they have will actually come to fore. And that's something that we think once you solve the availability and affordability issue, creativity itself will be unleashed.
My last question to you would be, what is your message to the audience? What is one thing they must know about broadband? What is one very important frame they must use to understand the question of what broadband can do to a country, to a society?
Well, definitely that the focus from us as the world's largest satellite company, and our focus is definitely investing into these, driving community broadband and making it just more accessible. For us, it's not just about the business; it's really about giving a service to areas and growing service to areas whereby it's so much needed. We are continuously looking at ways, working with other parties to find accessible ways of making these applications a standard all over. For us, it is purely a fact that it is it's something that is needed by everybody. It's the biggest driver from us as an industry. It's far exceeded, media applications for that matter, I feel, in certain much required areas like Africa. So for us, focusing on making it more affordable, making it more accessible, and the same goes for the type of satellites that we design. The type of satellites that we design now, our high throughput epic satellites with spot beam technology, is because it's focused on certain key areas where there was never the need to really have such a huge strength of satellite capacity focused on that regions. But we are investing in designing our satellites to assure that if these regions broadband or any data requirements are grown into these regions, that we are capable of offering the most cost-effective, high-efficiency solutions on the satellite in these regions.
From my own perspective, I think what we would recommend is that everyone here should definitely embrace broadband when it is delivered and how it is delivered. Obviously, the demand for broadband is insatiable. The more capacity is provided, the more consumption of broadband is taken up, which is fantastic. However, our ability to deliver that broadband is where we would need everybody to help embrace. Once we're able to roll out, in terms of the actual infrastructure that we're going to put in the ground to make it happen, I think we all need to have a sense of responsibility for it. We all have a responsibility to make sure that our infrastructure is not vandalized, that our infrastructure is kept safe and secure. Once it is kept safe and secure, rest assured that in terms of delivery, it's something that will definitely go through. Also, we would like to appeal to government. The power sector reform is something that will definitely help the rollout of broadband in Nigeria. Power is a major issue for us in terms of delivery of communication services here in Nigeria. And being able to cross that hurdle will definitely ensure that we're able to deliver qualitative broadband services in Nigeria. Thank you.
I think for me, one important thing to take away is that our life is converging. There is no saying our lives are converging, and it's all converging to the broadband. Essentially, somebody talked about here yesterday. Somebody talked about Uber being the largest taxi company in the world and it owns no taxis. Businesses are converging. Netflix essentially is actually the largest warehouse of movies and TV content in the world, but it has no TV station essentially. So our lives are converging to broadband. So essentially we have to embrace it. And BCN is playing a major role in making sure that broadband is available and affordable to everybody else within the space.
Great. Almost out of time, let's take one last quick comment.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ezekiel from Cameroon. I work with Vietnam Telecom, my state of Cameroon. The first question I want to propose a contribution first to MTN. I wish to inform you that as you're getting to broadband, you should equally think about the possibility of having a backup system. Perhaps I don't know the technology which you're using, but what we use in my company, we use a ring technology. In case we have a fiber cut, the microwave can still compensate without the people noticing that there is a problem. The second goes now to latency. As you're trying to take fiber to the various states, I'll equally want to make you understand that you should be looking for the possibility of having a backup as well. Because from what I got to learn from other friends here, you have some points like in Port Harcourt, Lagos, and Abuja, which you have the fiber that comes into the country. You have to start looking for means in order to run another backup link in case of, to permit the end user to be connected at all time. Thank you.
You would respond to some of those comments now, or take them offline?
Okay, I definitely take on board the point that you've made in terms of ensuring that our network is resilient. Oftentimes we have the ring technology, we have it already. Sometimes all those points that you have. However, your point is definitely taken on board, and it's something that we make sure we work into our network as we develop it and as we grow it. Thank you very much.
I mean, I also agree with Roque. Now, in our network designs, redundancy is one of the key issues. I mean, for instance, as a wholesale carrier, where other operators come to rent service from me, I cannot afford to architecture itself. Redundancy is one of the first requirements. We do not build linear networks. We actually have to build ring networks themselves. And redundancy is not just on the level of building infrastructure. It's also on the level of the active devices. So redundancy is a several.
Outside, we'll come back here by 6:30 or 7:30 for dinner. Thank you all very much, and I will see you all either at drinks or dinner or definitely tomorrow morning for day 3 of IADS 2016. Thank you all very much, and have a good evening.
Your international superstar DJ and Rihanna on the music.